For a start, I love that song, the 1975. I like the way that on our debut album, the band is called the 1975. That song is called the 1975 off the album, the 1975. I think it says quite a lot about... that song was us stating our identity. I think what happened was George had made this...
I remember the first time we heard that, the first sound that I ever created.
Well, you'd made a piece of music, hadn't you? You'd made like half a song or something, and we were listening to it, and we were like, yeah, it's quite good. And then we stripped it back and just listened to that.
Well, it was an intro to a song, but then we realised that the rest of the idea wasn't that brilliant. But the initial sound was the very first sound that you hear is that like. It's just a weird kind of... It's
this kind of electric... It's just
it's
exciting
just like
sound.
An arpeggiator made from a guitar, but it's the most pensive sound on the album. It's like... It's hopefully immediately captivating, and we just heard... When we heard that on its own, we were like, I think this is the start of the album.
Yeah,
like,
straight
that
away.
was it, and then we never went back. We never really questioned that. And that was quite a long time ago.
The City goes back a long time. We actually listened to the original demo of The City the other night, and it was this very kind of hip-hop inspired kind of drum loop with very, very lo-fi kind of synths on it. And I think an interesting story about The City is that the second verse, which we get prided on as being some of our good lyrics, which is, what is it, the... Community service was the best job he ever had. He was cleaning up. He got good with his 4s and his 2s. Community service was the best job he ever had. He was cleaning up, accounting card, whatever it is. I don't even know. But the point is, the fact that line, I found... We'd already written the song, pretty much. And I found these lyrics in a pair of jeans that we'd worn that night out in the casino. Do you remember that night? That it was to do with some... I think it was my dad's birthday. And we went out fully. And a week later, I found this set of lyrics. And I had no recollection of who it was about or what it was about or where it came from. But when we put it in, we thought, it's perfect. And I loved that. Because that's what that song's about. The City is a love letter to finding yourself in the kind of... like. Manchester or London, if you come from a small town, it's just, and you're young, it's just this baffling cacophony of kind of noise and ideas. And
it's your kind of like virgin experience in a city when you discover what you can do, and when you first can drive a car and you drive into a city and you're just like...
It's a love letter to that feeling.
But also kind of feeling you realise you're kind of small and irrelevant at the same time.
Money is, I think, especially me at my most self-loathing. It came from another minimalist approach, that song. It was a song that George had started working on, and after 2 minutes of sitting down together...
It was a really heavy, it was kind of, it was really an electro, just beat.
Yeah.
With that.
And we were just really... listening to a lot of Prince and stuff like that, so we started working on some kind of just juxtaposing like real organic funk sounds with kind of new school electronic music, I suppose. That's where the sonics that song comes from. But I think that song's more defined lyrically because it's so we could talk, all of us, for an hour about what makes money up. It's all about syncopation. It's a song that we love and we could love to talk about. But I think for people to be interested, it's the most self-deprecating, it's the most self-loathing song.
There's a lot of really literal kind of references that you can take as well that immediately conjure up a story.
Exactly. That's not that's not me being metaphorical in that song. That's like
it's on the whole, it's just like
quite straight up night out.
If you've experienced those things, you know exactly what that song is about. It's
a bit of love letter to our love of that first Streets album as well.
Yeah, more.
That's true.
The most
original Pirate material. Yeah, it's a good point. It's. I'm very inspired by Mike Skinner and that kind of idea of beat poetry and almost what he calls street poetry. And I think it's cool to talk about what actually happens, and that's what happened in our youth. Chocolate's a weird one for us. It's subject matter-wise, it's so specific. It's about a very specific group of people at a very specific place at a very specific time. It's, I suppose, that's our kind of ode to the relationship that we had with authority figures in our town, whether that be parents or the police, or it's kind of a... There's a lot of smoking weed in cars where we come from. Not to be brash, but there's a lot of that. There's a lot of kind of small town boredom, and that's what that song's about. Leave us alone. Do you know what I mean? What else are we going to do? And it's fun to play.
Yeah, I guess Sex is kind of the most aggressive song on the album.
It's one of the oldest ones we've got.
Yeah, again, it's got really...
The second song that we've put on the album.
Really early origins, but I don't think we've had 3 or 4 different versions of it before, and we never felt like it had reached its kind of, again, kind of romantic potential.
Yeah. It is me at my most romantic lyrically. It's quite a brash song in the way that it's produced and the way it's put across, and it's called Sex. But it's actually quite a sad little song, that. And that's just about every prudish, indecisive 17-year-old girl out there, do you know what I mean? Like, they've all got boyfriends. What does that actually mean when you're that age? What does a boyfriend mean? Like, didn't really mean much to most of the girls that I knew. So I suppose it's about...
Zing.
It's about that, really. I think Sex is the perfect song to kind of sum up our attitude of honesty will always out, you know? People really, really connect with that song because they've been through that. And we've not dressed it up in any kind of ideas of love or connoting anything else. It's just about what happened. That's what happens. Talk. It came very late to the table. It came in the pre-production of the album. Why did we write that song?
I think we were that's one of the songs that we actually wrote jamming.
It was just...
Yeah.
We did it in the studio, and then...
We don't do that very much
anymore. That's what it was. We were rehearsing for the recording session, and then we just started jamming.
We're so good. What about that? That's good.
We were jamming out. I said we never jam out.
We don't do that very much. A lot of the way that we write and produce music is based around computers and discussion.
I guess that song was us trying to play like computers, though. It wasn't. There's no parts on it that were.
No, we were trying to play loops on our instruments. But yeah, no, that song is me. Again.
That's my favourite lyrics to any of the songs.
Is it? Yeah.
It's
one of the strongest. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
That and Menswear.
It's about that's about me being just a polemicist. Me being able to influence the way that people think about me during a conversation through the way that I talk, not necessarily through what I say. I suppose it's about social manipulation, normally to do with girls, which is quite a bad quality. But it's interesting.
It's more to do with your family.
Yeah, my relationship with my parents and the way that's the way that I am is brought from there.
Kitchen for some reason, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. An encounter is one of the is one of the interludes on the album that separates the album into three. Like we always say, it's kind of like three major scenes, and it comes from Robbers. And when we stripped it back, we found there was lots of elements in there that created this kind of beautiful ethereal soundscape. So an encounter came from that, and we didn't want it to be long, we just wanted it to be meaningful, because we, like many records that we've grown up and loved, a great interlude can define a record, you know? Something that, it's almost like the sound of the album.
Yeah, it's building something so that when you take that away, it makes the next thing more of an impact.
Exactly. And it comes from, an encounter is meant to be the two characters from the narrative of Robbers meeting. That's what that is. That's their first encounter. And that's what it sounds like. Heart Out is like a lot of songs about me introspectively looking at one of my past relationships. I had quite an intense relationship with a girl who lived in another country. And we never really saw eye to eye, but I think the whole romance of the whole situation spurred us on to be together longer than we were. I think that's what the song's about, and my obsession with consuming everything, with being constantly stimulated, and the fact that I can never just exist, or I find it difficult to coexist with somebody who's supposed to be like an extension of my personality, like a partner or something. These are the only people that I manage to do it with. And it's about, yeah, her struggles and my struggles with understanding each other. And I think the narrative of that song is juxtaposed by how it sounds like the soundtrack to jet skiing in Miami. Because it's what it does now when I listen to it. It's this very kind of, it's this very kind of Eurythmics-inspired kind of big, there's a lot of kind of 80s production in it. But it doesn't have a nostalgic feeling, because I think it's got quite a modernist approach to the way that we took on the song. Settle Down is our moment of let's do like Scritti Politti, like Peter Gabriel, full on pop anthem. Like, we miss those days, man. We miss the days where like credible artists were making pop music. So it doesn't really happen anymore. Like Phil Collins on Face Value, or Peter Gabriel on So, Paul Simon on Graceland. They are just amazing pop arrangements that were so like revered and critically acclaimed. And
there wasn't any rules for those albums, I don't think, either. Like,
I think because it was so experimental at the time, like in regards to they were producing it. We just wanted to make a record that made us feel like, I don't know, I want to dance with somebody, or like, you know, those kind of records where they just have that undeniable vibe.
Yeah, it's the kind of, you're not worrying about dignified parts almost. You're just worrying about the overall
feeling
song,
of it.
The undeniable song.
Yeah. Robbers is very important to us, that song. I think that's the oldest song on the record, right? Mm. Mm-hmm. And it's Bonnie and Clyde.
The first song that we recorded where we thought that we could make music, could make pop music properly.
That was also the first song that got us any...
Yeah, it's a song that got us our manager, who stuck with us for about 20 years while we sorted everything out. But Robbers is... I fell asleep watching True Romance.
I thought you were right.
It's a great movie, but it's probably for the 10th time I'd seen it. I was watching True Romance. I fell asleep. I had one of the most vivid dreams. You know when you dream and you wake up and you're like, oh, God, I'm so devastated that that doesn't exist. Like when you've just been flying or something. This dream was so perfect and romantic, and it's one of those dreams that you're so amazed by how coherent the narrative is, and it holds ideas. And it was this little film that I dreamt up about these two, obviously it's a similar situation, about a bank robbery gone wrong. It's kind of set near where I lived, but almost in this kind of... It was a very, very strange... But I wanted to write a song about it, and we got in a room and wrote this piece of music, and then lyrically it was just became... I really got into it. I really got into these two hypothetical characters who had kind of like totally fallen in love, and I'd made them up, and yeah. I think you can make up your own story with that song, but it's a pretty song. Girls is a lot of fun for our band. I think it's one of those songs that's like...
We had no idea what we'd done when we'd written it. We were like...
We didn't know. When we wrote it, we were like, have we written our best song? Or is this just so...
too heterosexual. It's not the
Is it like really, really like the campest song ever? Is it like... We didn't know in the original days. Because the original demo came around and it was very playful for our band. But then, as soon as it got juxtaposed, which seems to be my word of the day in this album, like with a narrative and a lyrical idea that was a bit more dour and a bit more sinister, it really worked. And it was, I think, and the only reason we think that is because it was the first time we'd gone, here's a guitar and a chord as what we're doing for our band. We don't really do that. Every guitar has been... All our guitars are very influenced by like either kind of like 80s funk and 70s funk, or like Kevin Shields by My Bloody Valentine. There's not a lot of chords going on. Girls is a straight up song. It's like Young Girl. You know, young girl, get out of my mind. That's what I wanted to do. It's good, and that's our version of that song. "12" came around very late. George was like fiddling around, just making sounds, and I think
it sounded like what we were feeling like at that time.
Yeah, and I was listening to the album obviously a lot, and we must have just been at a certain time. We just said that goes there. It's just one of those things. Like with our aesthetic, like with everything, like we've never really had to actively search for a consensus. Like we've never had to. There's never that much kind of debate. It's just we all kind of know what's right and feel it. And that song just was that part of the album.
It was the end of our first journey in America as well, right?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So it was kind of...
inspired by that. I think Shui Out is born from our love of disco, Donna Summer kind of vibes. Still fades out, doesn't it? It fades out at the end, and that was because, like, you know, Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel. Once that song starts, like the Fall to the Floor, you can't stop that song. Certain songs that can't stop because it's totally lose everything, and that's one of the songs with Shui Out. It felt like this kind of like train of like disco ideas from kind of Michael Jackson to Donna Summer, and it's about, I suppose it's about girls that can't dance, but with every song there's so many different kind of levels of what it's about. But yeah, Shui Out's about
moving but you just can't move.
Moving but you just can't move. That girl in the club, and my nights spent with them and everything that consists of it. Menswear is about fighting and the politics of drugs at a wedding. That's what that's about. Everything that goes into that kind of... Everyone knows what that's like. Everyone's been... Well, I've been to a lot of weddings, and there's... If you're in a manor in the middle of the countryside, there's a certain amount of things that you can achieve, and the song's about that. Everybody wanting to have as good a time as possible.
It's kind of the difference between everyone wearing a suit and a dress and sitting around a table, and the difference between everyone
just being totally debauched.
Yeah,
and that's what weddings kind of seem to be like. And it's a very, very fast-paced song lyrically. It's like very, very fast, and it's a story about a fight at a wedding that happened. Pressure is a song about my relationship with the world that I was kind of brought up in. My parents are involved in the media. And I grew up in a world where you're quite exposed. Everyone's quite exposed. And there's an element of pressure on you as a person, not necessarily as a professional. And it's about how that idea has affected me and my family. My life changed dramatically this year with the band's kind of acceleration in popularity, which meant that I've not really been home since January. And at the same time, my family has been in a transition mode, of which the house that I used to live in and the house that we've spent every rehearsal since day one, we've sold that house. And one of the last times we got the opportunity to go back there, the place where we recorded every EP and rehearsed, we had 2 days there. And we realised that there's one bit on that album, that there's one part of our life that hadn't been spoken about, and that was right then. Leaving. And I can't really listen to that song because I've got a 12-year-old brother, and he's still there. And my mum and dad are now separated, and my dad lives up north, and my mum lives in the middle of the country, and I'm not there. And it's some of the least amount of lyrics I've ever put in a song, but with the most amount of meaning. I think that's what good lyrics are, really. If you can convey an idea. And it's me genuinely wanting to know, is there somebody who can watch you, you know? And that song was just recorded. Well, I didn't write it. We didn't write it. I just sat down at the piano and we played it. I played something like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, we couldn't finish it.
We couldn't stop crying. We just cried for 2 days straight. I think that's why my voice is so delicate, because I couldn't perform it a lot of the time, because it was like the barest we've ever laid ourselves. And I think that song on the album is one of the most important songs that I'll ever write. Yeah, and it's for my little brother. That's his song.